Hello, everybody. Welcome to our usual Saturday it's not Saturday, it's actually Sunday, our Sunday afternoon chat. All right, today we have a very special guest, someone who is from the hospitality industry. Well, one of those things that people always ask for me as a pharmacist in community, how do we actually feel appreciated by people? How do we get the kinds of reviews that we get? How do we provide the experience? What is considered a good experience for our patients? Sometimes people say, oh, it's quick and efficient service. Sometimes people say it's the relationship. Where is the balance? Is there a balance? Today, we have someone who has been in hospitality for a really, really long time. And we're going to pick his brains a bit on how we can provide hospitality in healthcare, all right, based on his experiences in his industry. Everyone, welcome to the 14th episode of Life, Love, and Lipidemia. Welcome. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Life, Love, and Lipidemia. So this is a chat show where we typically have a guest on. And some people ask me, isn't this a pharmacy program? Isn't this a pharmacy chat show? How come I'm talking about hospitality today? Well, that's because there's a lot that we can learn from people who are outside our industry. And today we have Joe Alessandroni. He's owner at the Junior the Pocket Bar. Hi, Joe.
Hi, Sean. Thanks for having me today.
Joe, you joined the restaurant business at a very young age, at 15 years old. Why the restaurant business? How do you get started?
I think I got started as a lot of people get started, just as a little after work job. My first job in the industry actually was cleaning up after service for a restaurant that my friend's parents owned that just was a lunch and dinner place. So I'd come in after school, they'd make me something to eat. I'd spend a few hours cleaning up the kitchen and doing some prep work for the next day. Summertime break came along. I started bussing tables, then started getting to know things a little bit, was working my way through school and thought I would be finished with this after university, but you never know. I went to school for entrepreneurship and ended up 10 years later owning my own small cocktail bar. So it's been a long journey and a really interesting career that has brought me a lot of places.
So you started off it was in the US, was it?
Yeah, so most of my career was in San Francisco, California, and I was running some well-known cocktail bars in 2010, 2011. And my friend Michael Callahan moved to Singapore to start 28 Hong Kong Street. And I thought that was pretty interesting sounded. We kind of stayed in touch. And about a year later, they were expanding and they were starting a spirits distribution and bar consultancy company. So he called me, asked if I'd be interested in Singapore. Ended up coming sight unseen because it seemed like a really interesting opportunity and some good people who are running the company. So I've been here for a little more than 7 years now. Started out running 28 Hong Kong Street, but I have worked in building a lot of big bar programs around the region for places like the Four Seasons and the Raffles Hotel, and have trained hospitality professionals in Korea, Cambodia, Bangkok, as well as spending most of my time in Singapore. And have even done a hospitality class for the Culinary Institute of America here. And then finally last year, stepped down from that more corporate consulting role to spend full time on Junior the Pocket Bar, which is Singapore's probably smallest cocktail bar in Embarked.
Wow. When you have Junior the cocktail bar, or Junior the Pocket Bar, it's a blend of drinks and food as well. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in the hospitality scene or in the cocktail scene, it's is it common to have food to complement drinks? Is that a very important part of the experience?
I think it's important for two reasons. First off, having food really sort of keeps things a little bit more civilized. If you have a very high energy, very music driven nightclub type of bar, you're probably not going to serve much food. But most people who are a little more adults, going out for a little, you drink some strong drinks, you want to have some food with it. It keeps the experience a bit more civilized. And then, of course, in Singapore, most of the cocktail bars have a food program because we are really all operating as a restaurant license. It's actually quite hard to get just a pub license. So almost all of the cocktail bars have food, which goes along nicely and enhances the experience, I think.
When we think about the experience that we provide, and when we think of hospitality, so hospitality is not a word that we commonly use in the healthcare industry. We commonly use the term service, the kind of service that we provide. Is there a difference between the terms hospitality and service?
Absolutely. So Danny Myers, who is a very famous New York City restaurateur, he's the guy behind Shake Shack, among the others. He sort of defines service is something that happens to you. Hospitality is something that happens for you. I think generally service is the goods and services that you provide. Hospitality is the way that you make people feel in providing that service. So hospitality is really applying emotional skills to the art of service.
Oh. So how do you provide that kind of emotional skills there?
I think there are a few keys to great hospitality. Number one, you have to make it feel personal. The way that you make it feel personal is using empathy, active listening, but you also have to know your stuff. You have to be competent. You have to know your work and really be able to provide the goods and services in a very professional way. On top of that, you add your empathy and those more emotional skills. And I think the way to do that is with paying attention, active listening, and being prepared.
So when we discuss this topic on extraordinary hospitality, so what is, in your opinion, what is ordinary and what's the extraordinary part of hospitality?
I'm going to look at my notes a little bit here. I think, number one, the difference between ordinary and extraordinary is when it really feels personal. I think a great example is when you think of an omakase sushi restaurant. I think sometimes that is where they provide great hospitality. People get that idea mixed up a little bit. They think, oh, they'll make me whatever I want. In my opinion, that's not what you go to an omakase restaurant for. You go there because you trust the skill and the quality of the chef, and you know that you're in good hands of a professional. The chef has used his professional judgment to pick what is the best fish in the market today, what is the best way to prepare it, and then pays attention to the speed that you're eating, what you like, what you don't like, to tailor the meal to your preferences. But he's not asking you what you would like. He's using his experience, his skill, his passion in order to make that experience feel personal for you. I think one of the things you were talking about is for the pharmacy, people say that it needs to be quick and fast. I do think that to some degree that is true. You can't have amazing hospitality without the efficiency and professionalism of good service. Being prepared, doing things in a timely manner, doing things right the first time is just showing that respect to the guests, that you're professional and you're prepared and you're good at what you do. Adding the extraordinary element is doing it in a manner that makes them feel relaxed and well taken care of. One of the other examples I always use when we're teaching hospitality, it's an extreme example from a restaurant perspective, but is when somebody's going to the dentist. Nobody really likes to go to the dentist. It's an experience that makes almost everyone nervous, right? But the best you can do is if you feel that your dentist is professional, can explain to you what's going to happen, is pretty quick with his work, but also notices when you get tense. You can sort of relax as much as you are able to relax because you don't feel that you're in danger, right? You're not nervous, you're not tense. If your dentist was asking you, well, do you think I should use a number 2 file or a number 4 file? There's no way you're going to be able to relax, right? He's paying attention to you and that, oh, do you need a minute, or telling you to relax a little bit, or telling you what the next thing is that's coming. But that's really just to provide that environment where you say, you know what, I'm in good hands. I can relax and just fall into the experience. Much lower stakes, but that's what we try to go do when we go to a restaurant. People know what's going on, they know what to expect, and their needs are taken care of before they are conscious of needing them.
So there's a bit of prediction on what the needs of the guests are.
Absolutely. I say that you need the personal touch, but the reality is everyone may be special in their own way, but their experience is fairly predictable, right? And part of the professionalism is predicting, and part of empathy is putting yourself in their shoes. If I am going through this experience, what are the things that I'm going to need at different points in the process? If I can get ahead of that cycle and predict before you ask for it or before you're conscious of needing it, that makes me feel like I'm really being paid attention to. So a very simple example, say you have a burger on your menu and you know the burger is just a little bit extra greasy. You put down a few extra serviettes before it comes. By the time the guest realizes they're reaching for that extra napkin, it's already there. That makes them feel like they are in good hands. They don't need to look up. It doesn't break their concentration. It feels very personal to them in the moment. For you, you know that out of the last 95 people who have had the burgers, it's a good idea because everyone actually has the same experience. You better put down that extra napkin. But to the person it's happening to at the time, it feels like a one-time, very personal event.
When we think about something, an experience that's personal, there is a certain conception that a personalized service is usually a very high class kind of service. You know, what do you think? Is it a premium thing to have?
I think it's really just about attention and attention to detail. And you can have that feeling at any level of spending. If you go to your regular coffee shop and they know that you always take 3 sugars because you go there every day, that is personalized sugar, right? That's personalized service, right? It can really be that simple sometimes, and it doesn't need to be very involved. More than anything, it's just showing that somebody is paying attention to you. I do think that it's more likely, if you're paying a premium in whatever field that it is, if I'm buying a Nitro watch, if I'm buying an expensive handbag, if I'm going to a Michelin star restaurant, they usually have more resources to devote to that personal experience. But I think there are small things that we can apply in almost any situation that make it feel a little more personal. Because what people really want is they want to be acknowledged, and they want to feel that the person is paying attention to them, not just trying to get it over with and not, get the experience over with, I guess.
Oh, Joe, speaking of personalized experiences, I mean, we have something similar in the experiences that we have. You do bartending work as well. I do pharmacy work, and the similarity is we both serve our guests over a counter. Does the counter present some sort of a barrier, you think, to being able to provide that service?
From bartending, I actually think not at all. I think it actually provides more of a stage than a barrier. And a lot of the thing we're trying to do to provide great hospitality is show our confidence and our competence in what we're doing. And a lot of that competence and confidence makes people relax. That's what makes people feel, okay, this guy's a professional. He's going to take good care of me. So when we're behind the bar, that comes from everything to the way that we carry ourselves, the way that we set up our station. If everything's neat and tidy and doesn't look like a mess back there, that's sending the message, we're in control of the situation. I'm ready to take good care of you, right? And then you can always, I may be busy making drinks, but every guest that walks up, I'm going to try to make eye contact. If right off the bat somebody feels acknowledged, that helps them be patient. And it may not be their turn for a minute yet, but there's nothing worse than awkwardly sitting there, waiting to be acknowledged, not knowing, I can see this person is busy. Do I bother them? Do I just sit here quietly? They can wait the same amount of time, but if you just make eye contact, make them recognize that you've seen them, they're usually going to be okay for a couple of minutes, even if you can't get to them. So I actually think that, the bar actually gives you a way to show non-verbally that you are in control of the situation and that you're there to serve.
Oh, and it's pretty interesting because when we talk about eye contact as a form of acknowledgement, when I first started my work in the pharmacy, one of the things that we always discuss is should a service staff go up to the customer and say, "Hi, welcome to the store." Because some people like to be approached, some people don't like to be approached. How do you make that judgment?
I think this is where you need to use your active listening skills. And active listening means going beyond the words that people use, but listening to their tone of voice, paying attention to their body language. A lot of times your guest is not telling you with words what it is that they're really looking for. So for example, somebody who has a lot of questions on the menu, maybe they come to the bar by themselves, maybe they're waiting for people, the bar's pretty busy, so they maybe feel a little bit awkward being there alone, right? Sometimes they'll ask a bunch of questions about the menu, or they'll start a personal question. They're not really asking for the answer to that question. The message they're really sending you is, I would like you to engage with me so I don't feel awkward or so I'm entertained, right? Other people could answer that same question. They're not really making so much eye contact. They give you a one-word answer. They may be sending a message, I really just want to be reading on my phone at the moment, or I'm into the conversation I'm having. So I think everyone needs to be acknowledged, but certainly in a retail situation, if somebody's maybe just browsing or they're not certain what they're looking for, maybe they feel like if you do too much of a greeting and get into their personal space, it's putting them on the defensive a little bit, like, oh, I don't want to bother this person, I don't want to take up their time. So I think a lot, if you start small and then you look for the nonverbal cues in communication and let the guest guide you how much you engage or don't engage. I think one thing that's really important is that it never feels like you're just going through a script.
Now, most of us do have some sort of script when you approach a customer, right?
Of course we do, because the process only has so many steps, right? There's only so many ways. The process is always going to be the same. Everybody's experience is, I'm looking for something, I find it, I know what the price is, maybe I have some questions about it, but I just think it's important to internalize that script and keep it as natural as possible. You don't want to be sitting at a restaurant, at a table at a restaurant, and the server explains to you the specials, explains to you menu. You then hear them talk to the next table and they use the exact same words as they did for you. That makes it feel much less personal. When you internalize that, when you really have competence with your stuff, you will find your own way to say it. You'll make slight little changes that makes it feel a little more natural. It doesn't feel like it's just a chatbot giving you a script, I guess.
And so you're catering those comments to the profile of the guest based on the prediction, based on your understanding of the profile of the guest from table A and table B, and you say the same thing in a different way to the different guests.
I don't even think it's that conscious necessarily. I think it's more that if you're trying to memorize a script and you're still not 100% internalized it, then you're going to use all of those words, right? If you're telling a story to your friend, right? If you went back and you tell the same story about something that happened to you to 3 different people, you'll use slightly different words. You maybe put it in a slightly different order because that's how your memory actually works, right? I think it's the same thing. Once you've internalized it, once you're really competent on here are the 3 points of the message that I'm trying to get across. Every time you say it, you will naturally have just a few variations in the words that you use and how that you say it. It sounds a lot more natural. That's how real conversation works. So it's not always consciously saying, oh, this is a larger party, or these people are a little bit younger, or whatever it may be. It's not a natural thing. It's just more that it comes natural to you. And then if you pay attention to that body language right away, you make it a little shorter, you make it a little longer, people will usually give you the message of how much they want to be engaged.
And one of the things that I tried to figure out from a very early time in my career is which customer or which guest wants to know more and who wants to know less. Because for us in pharmacy, we have a lot of technical knowledge, right, on drugs and side effects, and but when you think about providing the experience, when you're thinking of providing the service or the hospitality to the patient, if they want to know more and you tell them very little stuff, to them they say that's horrible service. If they want to know very little and you download the whole encyclopedia on them, they're going to get pissed off. So and one of the things that I've tried to do over the years is to try to distinguish which customers want to know more, which customers want to know less. I've also tried to consider based on the different cultures of the people who approach us, because I mean, in Singapore, you have people from all over the world. It's not just the local Singaporeans who come and see us. You've worked in a few places all over the world. You've done consulting for big brands in Korea, and you've worked in the US, and now you're in Singapore. Do you notice certain trends?
I do think there is, I don't want to overgeneralize, but I do think there are some differences in the approach between sort of a more Western and Eastern style of hospitality. And I think understanding that helps people get to a better result sometimes. I think at a very basic level, Western hospitality can be a little bit more forward. You're more quicker in trying to establish your competence and your confidence. So it can be a little bit more forward. I think
that's more Western.
For Western, yes. And for Eastern hospitality, sometimes showing your guests respect is not being so forward, letting them lead a little bit more. So for example, when we were doing a project in Korea for a 5-star hotel, it was a mix of sort of more traditional, high-end local guests that would buy their bottle of whiskey and sit at the table and drink the expensive bottle, and Western international travelers. And the traditional Korean style of hospitality is the server would stand at attention basically 10 feet away or so from the table to show that they were there, but they would not come back over to the table unless somebody called them over. For Western guests, as a guest, you feel it's rude to have to call your server over. You expect somebody to keep checking in throughout the process. So they would send nonverbal cues that maybe their drink was finished, they were ready for another one, or they were ready for the bill, but then they would get anxious saying, this person's just standing there, they're not paying attention to my cues, why aren't they coming over here? Finally, maybe they call them over, but they feel like that's being rude. The better understanding you have, without making generalities, but the better understanding that there's different styles of showing respect for your guest and different ways of engaging can help you adapt your style to the situation a little bit better. I think one of the things that I notice in not just in restaurant hospitality, but in service situations often in Singapore is people can be so worried about getting it wrong that they sort of, let good be the enemy of great sometimes. A lot of times in hospitality, there's not one right answer, but you have to be confident with the answer that you're giving. An example of that, we were at a Japanese place, we were eating our food, we were having some sake, finished, still had food on the table, said, I'd like another glass of sake. Which one do you recommend? And the server said, I'm not too sure. Let me grab the boss who really knows the sake very good. By the time the guy got over there, it was 15 minutes later and he knew the menu very well. But by the time we got more sake at the table, the moment had kind of passed. We had finished our food. There wasn't one right answer. If she had just said, I like this one, I'm sure it would have been fine. That was an example where any answer probably would have been a decent answer. You don't have to get to the one perfect answer, but understanding the context of the situation, that whatever you get me in the next 5 minutes is going to be enjoyable with the food, and that's going to create the experience. Being too afraid to give an answer that isn't perfect can sometimes get in the way of a good hospitality outcome. I think
could it be that some of the staff are too worried about getting complaints? Because I tried to get my staff to feel acknowledged and to feel recognized, when I was manager of the store. And they're like, don't want. Sometimes when customers write, later they complain, then very difficult.
That could very much be the case, but I think you have to be a little bit brave, right? You have to have the space to be able to make mistakes. Now, I know from a pharmacy perspective, there's some mistakes that could be really bad, some mistakes that are non-negotiable. But as far as the human element of it, you have to be open enough to be willing to make a small mistake and then just be able to fix that mistake. I think one of the big things that I see is when a small mistake has been made. Somebody's waited a little bit too long, whatever it may be. Sometimes people are too quick to try to explain why it wasn't their fault and be defensive about it when it really doesn't matter. Most of the time, it's irrelevant. If you just can be humble, move on to a solution, that's more likely to get a good outcome. Could be as simple as something as, I told the taxi driver not quite the right entrance of where to drop me off, right? And then he's telling me, oh, well, you told me wrong. Well, how is that relevant? I'm just saying I need to be half a block down. I think people are afraid they're going to get the complaint or get in an argument, but what are the chances that the guest ends up being happier just because you proved to them that they were the wrong one who was wrong in the first place? I think a lot of times it's not very relevant. You need to have that humbleness to just get to a good answer.
So you think that sometimes we spend too much time trying to defend ourselves rather than look forward to the solution?
Yeah, I think we all do that. And that's one thing in your personal life, but in a hospitality situation, keep your eye on what is the outcome that I'm trying to accomplish here. I'm trying to make somebody feel acknowledged and respected. Of course, there's certain lines that somebody can't cross, but more often than not, it's great hospitality, even if clearly the other person was mistaken or didn't listen to you correctly or misunderstood what you said. It's just good hospitality to not embarrass anyone and move directly on to the solution.
All right. At this point, I just want to say hi to some of our friends who are here. Jasmine's here. Jasmine Doreen is here, my previous boss. Jasmine says Junior is awesome. Oh, she's been there.
Oh, so glad to hear it. Thank you.
And Lakshmi, as always, thank you everyone for joining us. If you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel, the link is right there. Just head on to subscribe. Okay, Joe, the difference between, or I would say the similarity between your work in F&B and our work in healthcare is when it's off-peak, it can be pretty quiet, right? When it is peak hours, the crowd sometimes is really overwhelming, and yet we have to maintain a certain level of service and hospitality at the points when we are the most stretched. So essentially, you're always in a high pressure kind of situation. How do you cope with that?
Well, I think there's a few things. I think the number one thing that I try to teach young bartenders, and this is maybe the most fake it till you make it, and is easy. You always have to appear under control behind the bar. Even when it's busy, things are difficult. If people are worried it's going to take too long, if you look too stressed out and if you look too flustered behind the bar, that is sending out the energy that, oh, if this guy's nervous and he's not under control, now all of a sudden I'm a little bit more anxious and nervous. this is going to take a while. Maybe he's going to forget about me. Maybe he's going to forget about my order. So number one is just trying to control that anxiety. Sometimes something goes wrong and you genuinely are behind and you look up and you're like, oh man, that's a lot of people. Taking a step back and just sort of remaining calm and in control and knowing that you do your best and it's going to pass is one of the first things that you have to learn. Because once you look stressed out, it's going to send that stress out to everyone who is waiting. Number two, this is where good preparations and good systems really come into place. When you are slow, that is the time to prepare again for being busy. Can be as simple as, that's when you check to see if there's a printer roll in your machine or that you have enough pens or whatever it may be. Nothing worse than when you are under pressure and it's busy, slowing down for something that you could have prevented with a little bit better preparation when you did have the time. And then the most difficult one is most people are pretty good at reading the context, right? Somebody will have a 5-minute conversation with you when there's nobody else waiting in line. Most people see 7 people waiting in line behind them. They're not going to try to take up too much of your time either. They're going to ask all the questions they have to. But there's always those guests that don't have that awareness necessarily. So you get stuck in that position where, how do I take good care of this person? But I kind of need to move it along a little bit. I don't have all day to just chit chat. That's really a hard one. And it's maybe a very Western approach to it. But to be honest, in the bar sometimes, you have to be a little bit direct. You can be very, very polite, but I think very direct sometimes with people in the bar sometimes. So I'd love to talk to you about this more, but I have a few more people I need to help with this person. But I think there's a way to do it with kindness, where once you sort of point out that there's other people that need help, almost everyone is like, oh, of course, help them. But I think sometimes you're trying to do it, you're sending the body language, but sometimes you just need to be direct and not worry that it's going to upset that one person. As long as you stay kind and calm and direct and are asking somebody very reasonable, you need to take that risk that maybe that one person will be upset, but that's better than the 8 people that are waiting being upset. You can't let one person dominate all of your time.
Is that how you say it, where you tell the person that there are other people who need your help as well? Because one of the difficulties in community pharmacy is we try to have to build a relationship, and that involves getting into conversations with people, and they feel good, they feel comfortable, but yet you have 8 people who are waiting behind. It's always the difficult part on how you cut them off, correct? Because chat is fine, but not when you have 8 people behind. Is there a way that you recommend that we tell a person to stop talking, but because I have to get on? I love to chat with you, but how do you say it?
See, I think there's no perfect way to do it, right? But what you said stop talking because I have to get on. I think take yourself out of it and make it about the other people that you need to help. I wouldn't say, hey, sorry, I'm busy, or I need to help these other people. Say, can you give me a minute? These people need, if you're saying it's, I need to help so-and-so, or let me see what this person needs. And in that case, maybe at least if you just take a moment to break that conversation and acknowledge the person who's waiting, oh, I'll be with you in a minute, whatever it may be. At least you acknowledge them, then they're calm. Then if you still have to go back to finishing up with the person that you're with, most people, once they get that awareness of the other people around them, their politeness and their kindness is going to kick in as well, and they're going to realize, oh, it's time to wrap it up. I think a lot of times people don't get caught up in these conversations out of selfishness. They're just in the moment and they're not aware. Once you kind of can break that string a little bit, and they all of a sudden get the awareness of other people, their natural, oh, politeness, I don't want to hold this up too much, kind of kicks in. Or you can always say, we can get back to, let me just help this person real quick, and then I can get back to you. And then maybe they wait around, and then when you've cleared the 4 or 5 people, they still want to chat for 45 minutes, right?
And it's important to do that in a very respectful way, right? Because that is the essence of the relationship, being able to chat with people.
I think the best way for that, honestly, I don't think people misbehave in the pharmacy, but when somebody's maybe, they're very, very loud, or they're being a little bit rude, nothing terribly, but how do I address it? I think the best way to do it is you ask people for their help, even though really what you're doing is asking for their help to stop doing the thing that you're doing.
What do you mean? How do you ask them for their help?
How do I put this? Somebody's being very, very loud at the bar, right? Instead of saying, hey, I need you to be quiet, you're being way too loud. Say, hey, sorry, I'm really having trouble hearing this other person. Could you help me? Could you keep it down a little bit just to so I can hear the other person? Like, kind of make it not personal, I guess. And there's an art to that, but it's not about what you want versus what they want. You give them a task to do, and hey, could you help me out by doing X? Even just using those words, sometimes it changes it, where almost everyone naturally, if you ask them for their help in something, they have a hard time saying no. But if you're saying, I don't like this thing that you're doing and I disapprove of it, so you stopping doing this thing will be submitting to me. I guess it's subtle, but sometimes if you say, hey, could you help me out by keeping it down a little bit, it's still not easy, but generally people are going to say, okay, I can help you out doing that.
One of the challenges in one of our previous episodes, where we had this session called Pharmacy Hard Talk, where all the difficult questions that people in pharmacy wanted to ask but didn't want to ask. So one of the issues that was brought up is, in a community pharmacy setting, some pharmacists felt that it was not part of their job scope to engage in conversation that's non-medical in nature. Okay. And when I speak to some of the bosses or some of the seniors, they say, well, of course, they're not obliged to talk about anything that's non-medicine related. But yet there's the other perspective that talking about things that are not technical related helps to build the relationship. What do you think?
I think 100%. That is what helps to build the trust, right? And in an F&B situation, there's not things that are very high stakes, right? But it can be something, what you're trying to do is make sure that people aren't embarrassed. Everybody is afraid of being embarrassed, right? And that could be as simple as you have the name of a French wine on the menu and somebody's like, I'm not sure how to pronounce that. I don't want to be slightly embarrassed by saying it and saying it wrong and feeling a little bit stupid, right? So I think maybe this isn't the direct answer to your question, but a lot of times using that empathy and those active listening skills, what you're really looking for is, what is it this person really wants? Sometimes simply answering the question that they ask you, they're hinting at something else, right? You don't have to be a mind reader, but for example, for hospitality, maybe they're asking you about an item on the menu. How's this one? How's this one? What they're really looking for is some reassurance and permission that they're going to enjoy it and they're not going to make a wrong choice, right? But if you just say, do you like the chicken one? Yeah, it's good. That's not giving them anything to go on, really. What they're looking for maybe is a positive, is for you to show some excitement about the item, which tells them that, okay, I'm reassured and making a good choice. Sometimes even them just engaging you in a lot of questions, what they're really trying to say is, I'm a little bit awkward or uncomfortable in the situation. So it doesn't matter what you talk to them about, but you just talking to them and making them feel included makes them relax and feel that they're not, exposed by being a person who's sitting at the bar by themselves while they wait for their friend. I imagine in the pharmacy, sometimes it's the same thing. People have.
So a big part of it is helping the guest feel comfortable and feel at ease and feel like they are being taken care of. When it comes to the conversation that you were talking about, if it's not about personal questions, one of the things that we had a conversation about previously was if it's not about personal stuff, if the service provider doesn't feel comfortable talking about personal issues, they could also talk about technical knowledge.
It doesn't need to be overly technical, but fundamentally, the reason that somebody is there is for the service, right? They're not just coming to say hi. In a food and beverage setting, they want something to eat and something to drink, and they want to feel good while they're doing that. If you know the food and drink inside out, you may be a little bit more of a shy person who's not comfortable just engaging in idle chit chat, but that gives you a safe topic to talk about that still shows your empathy and your connection while staying on sort of keeping on a topic that's sort of not quite so personal as you talking about yourself. I think really knowing your product is what helps to build your confidence when you're talking to new people.
So you're addressing some part of the product itself.
Correct. If that's a more comfortable ground for you, that starts. Once you have a little bit of a more, even shy people, once you have a little bit of rapport, maybe that's your starting point, then it puts people at ease. And like you said, I'm sure in a pharmacy situation, maybe people need to be put at ease a little bit before they ask you a question that maybe they're a little more embarrassed about or something.
Yeah, because being at ease and being able to trust the person and for us in the pharmacy setting, of course, it's the sense of respect and confidentiality.
Yeah.
That sometimes they tell you stuff that they don't tell even their doctors or their other the other healthcare professionals, just because they trust you. Okay, so one of the parts of our topic today is engaging guests with personality. All right, so this personality that we are talking about here, is there one type of personality that works well, or is it about the service professional presenting who they are in an authentic way?
100% has to be authentic to who you are. Everybody can see through somebody who is trying to do something they're not comfortable with. And that actually works. I always try to have bartenders with different types of personality connect better with different guests, right? Because all of us are somewhere on the introverted or extroverted spectrum. So that means that naturally different personalities are just going to have an easier time connecting with some of our different regular guests, right? Some people really want to be entertained. Maybe they're drawn to that bartender who is a big storyteller, loves to be the center of attention. There are other guests who are much more comfortable talking with the bartender who's a little bit more quiet and a little bit more withdrawn as well, and doesn't require them to feel like they're also on stage. So I think really being true to yourself and being authentic is the only way you're going to show that confidence and do it in the way that works for you. You can never pretend to be something that you're not, and that will be okay because all of your guests are looking for something a little bit different anyway.
Do you think an introverted person can come across as charismatic?
Absolutely. I think, in fact, for bartending particularly, a lot of bartenders are more introverted than people think. But
Really?
they're so introverted behind the bar because in what other situation do people get to do something that you are good at, right? Earlier, you asked if the bar gets in the way of giving good hospitality. A lot of bartenders sort of are more comfortable standing behind that bar because that's their profession, that's their passion. They're meeting people in a space that is, you're coming into something that I'm good at and I'm getting to share something that I'm passionate and confident about. It's actually probably the space where they are the most comfortable. And maybe in their personal life, they're actually pretty introverted, but the more comfortable you are, the more confident you are, the more that you're meeting people on a comfortable ground for yourself.
How much is it about being a comfortable ground for yourself versus going out and making it feel like you're providing something special to the guests like heading out to meet them versus, talking across the table?
I always try to have something to do. I don't know how this would apply in the pharmacy setting, but for instance, I feel awkward just walking up to a table for no reason. Say, hi guys, how you doing today? Like, so I always have a water pitcher in my hand, or I wait to see that there's, one empty plate. I always have a purpose. Now, really, that's the opportunity for me to naturally check in and insert myself in the conversation. But I think always having something in your hand, always having a service purpose is what opens the door for that conversation a little bit. So maybe in the pharmacy setting, that means, going out and straightening up some stuff on the shelf or whatever it may be, right? But a lot of people are not going to be comfortable just walking up and saying hi without sort of that excuse to break the ice.
So it's about creating some kind of reason to approach. And is that common in the bartending scene, where you see the next level up is moving out of the bar and providing something extra? Is that a thing in the bartending scene?
Absolutely. Actually, it's one of the reasons why Junior the Pocket Bar is quite small. There are some amazing good F&B establishments that are pretty low energy. All of the energy flows from behind the bar, but you may be in a very comfortable seat, but the booth is 10 meters away from the bar, and your only interaction with the staff is a server that comes, takes your order, disappears, comes back. For a junior, we wanted to create that sense of intimacy and connection, so everyone is a bartender. You are greeted, seated, your order is taken, your water is poured by the same person that makes your drinks. So we have to keep it pretty small in order to do that, but I think it creates a little more sense of connection where we aren't just heads down making drinks. We come to the table, we take your order, we go back, we make your drink, we bring it back to you. It creates a more sense of connection there.
Is it difficult to train staff in that way, where, the concept that everyone is a bartender? Or is it intentionally done that way and make with a small area?
I think it is intentionally done that way, and there really shouldn't be much separation between the bartender and your server per se. I think, again, going back to that knowledge and that passion, you are always I may work a shift only on the floor as a server sometimes, right? But the fact that I'm passionate about what's happening behind the bar and I know what's happening behind the bar still translates into that confidence I can project when I'm explaining which drink somebody may like on the floor.
And that's where the complete experience comes in. So you're not confined to only your role as the server or the bartender.
Yep.
Okay. The customer is always right. Do you agree?
Technically, of course, the customer is not always right. Of course not. The customer is wrong a good deal of the time, but I don't know that is relevant. I think what is probably more relevant is the customer always wants to feel acknowledged and respected, and you want to get to a good answer, right? So there are certain lines that you just can't cross, right? I guess, for instance, like in the pharmacy, if the customer says, I want this prescription, I want more of these pills, you're like, well, I just can't. But really, those are few and far between. More often when the customer is always right, this is more about somebody's attitude. And I think very often, okay, there's this concept in hospitality that comes from psychology called the peak end effect. And what it means is that in any experience, what you really remember is the best thing that happened and the last thing that happened. So what this means is that you could go to dinner at a restaurant and they totally messed up your order and some food came out wrong. Some mistakes were made at some point in the process. But you're probably just going to remember the best part of it and the last thing that happened. So there's almost always a chance to get things back on track. And this goes back to, even if a mistake happened, even if it was the customer's fault, if there's a way that you can make them feel respected and get to a good answer, they can still leave happy. That doesn't necessarily mean agreeing that they were right. A lot of times it's just more about ego and how do you make them feel not disrespected or told they were wrong. There's not always there's different ways of doing that, but there are, even if something has gone off track a bit, there are ways to de-escalate it and get it back on track rather than digging yourself in deeper and arguing. And, you know, best case scenario, you convince them it was their fault in the first place. They still leave not very happy with the experience, right?
So a lot of it is about putting our ego aside.
Absolutely.
Do you see a difference in the way that service recovery is conducted in other places compared to Singapore?
I think the most important thing, and that's something that people are a bit nervous to do here sometimes, is just humbly acknowledge if you made a mistake, but that doesn't mean you can make light of it a little bit too. You don't have to lose your confidence in doing that, right? People, again, are very willing to put up with mistakes if they feel acknowledged and taken care of. So sometimes the best thing that you can do is just not too subservient, I guess, but just eye contact and just own it. Like, I'm old enough and confident I can kind of make light of it a little bit. You don't have to get nervous about it. You still have to maintain your confidence, but you just, I'm sorry that this happened. Let's make it right.
So saying sorry is actually something that's very comfortable for you to do. Because one of the things that when we teach such classes, it's always, if I say sorry, then they will think that I'm wrong, right? But I'm not wrong. That's what, you know, the typical thing that comes back.
In your personal relationships, you can decide when you are willing to, you know, put who's right aside for the relationship, right? In a professional setting, what's the point? Unless somebody has really crossed a line or has been very disrespectful to your staff or something, for the most part, you can apologize for them not being happy. It doesn't matter what the reason was. You can apologize for them not being happy, but you do need to maintain the confidence to not get bullied, right? Every once in a while, somebody is just mean. And if you're too apologetic, they're just going to be mean and keep bullying you. I think the best thing that works for me is just be direct without too much ego. What is it? Ask them, what is it that they would like from this situation? To be honest, sometimes that works. I've had people who are very upset at the bar. Not more in the States, but your bartender is very rude. I'm sorry that happened. What can we do to make it right? Well, I'm just telling you, they're super rude. I understand that. What can we do for you to make it right? A lot of times, what people, all they want to do is complain. But if all they want to do complain, there's nothing you can really do for it. I think you offer something reasonable, make it right. You apologize about what happened, but you try to move on to the solution as quickly as possible. It's never a good look to argue with somebody because they have no incentive to ever say, you know what, that place was right. I'm going to tell them that next time I go back there for shopping. They just won't come back again, right?
Yeah. Is there a boundary that you have where when somebody crosses that boundary, you say, that's enough, get out?
Hospitality to me extends to more than your guests. The first people who have to receive good hospitality are your other teammates and your employees. The reason for this is that they are going to have to come back with that open and giving attitude every day. So there are absolutely lines. The staff needs to feel safe and respected and taken care of before they are able to be comfortable and confident enough to do that for other guests. So there is a level of, you know, again, somebody's a little bit unhappy, whatever, but, you know, you can't let your staff be, people talk abusively to them, people be threatening, people be too mean. Then you're going to end up with somebody who's stressed out, feels that they haven't been supported, and then it's going to be very difficult for them to give good hospitality to the next 100 people that come in. So there's definitely a certain line that can't be crossed. Guests have to maintain a certain level of respect and not threatening and that type of thing as well. And it's important to stand up for your staff in those very few instances when somebody is really crossing a line.
It's difficult for staff to have to come back every day and have that, one of the things that we spoke about is empathy and being able to put yourself in your customer or your guest shoes. It can be tiring to do that day after day after day. How do you take care of that, preventing burnout for yourself?
I think two things. To finish up, another biggest thing, staff has to, people have to have a little bit of space to make mistakes and fail. They have to feel that even if they make a mistake, as their boss, you are going to be interested in, okay, that happened. How do we prevent it happening from next time? And how do we give you more tools and more support so we get a better outcome the next time? I think also people feeling so nervous of making a mistake that they're afraid to be confident. That's one of the most exhausting and stressful things that can happen to you at work. Everybody's going to make mistakes sometimes. How do we move on from them? As far as not getting burnt out, I think it in the bartending world, it's pretty simple. You need to get enough sleep, you need to exercise, and you need to have other things that you are passionate about that fill you up before you
other than bartending.
Absolutely. But you probably shouldn't be spending all of your time reading books about bartending, going to other people's bars to hang out. Like, what makes you a more interesting person, what makes you relatable to your guests is the things you do besides bartending. People may have questions about the drink, whatever else, but what are the other things that make you just a normal human being that you can connect on? And providing hospitality every day does, unless somebody's an extreme extrovert, it takes up some energy. Make sure you're doing things that fill that cup of energy back up when you're outside of work.
Do you think empathy is something that can be taught?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
How do you do that? Because it's the difference between coming across as human and being a robot.
Yep.
But people will say, I'm just born like that. I don't know how to be empathetic. How do you teach someone to be empathetic?
You have to be willing, but I think the core of empathy is genuinely putting yourself in somebody else's shoes. And the way to do that is to expose yourself to more perspectives. Watch movies about people who aren't like you. Read a book by somebody who doesn't come from the same perspective or background as you. Try to put yourself, for me, that's one of the things. Be a good listener. Listen to people's stories and don't immediately always think, how does this relate to me? Genuinely try to be a good listener and let their stories take you where they're going to go. Don't always try to fit it in your little box always, right? You just kind of have to be open to other people, and that builds up your perspective, I guess. Lets you be more open to, somebody might be different than me. They have a genuinely different approach. I think when you get into a long-term relationship, the first time you have a serious boyfriend or girlfriend, one of the first times you realize, oh, other people genuinely don't approach the same problem the way that I do. Doesn't necessarily think they're wrong. What they think is important, what they take out of the same story that I heard, might be something completely different than what I do. You're not going to change who you are, but be open to the idea that not everybody is the same as you, and that's okay.
Let's take a look at the future. Right, technology has been something that's disrupting many industries. In healthcare, within the pharmacy, we have robots that help to pick medicines, and that helps in efficiency to reduce errors. In the F&B line, what's the role of technology, and what's the future looking like?
Sure. I think the COVID period and circuit breaker has really, this is a trend that has been happening for a long time, and this really brought this to the forefront for a lot of us. Technology is going to have a role in food and beverage, but it needs to just be a tool that allows us to actually focus on the hospitality. That making people feel understood, making them feel it's a personal experience is really the only thing that we can provide that technology is not going to be able to do better at some point. So I think you have to take from our side, we have to take a humble look at what are the things that technology could help us save time so we can actually have more time to focus on that personal touch.
But that's where it gets a bit tricky, right? Because when you think about technology helping you to save time, make less mistakes, then you end up having a restaurant where everyone is ordering through iPads, and your sushi comes on the conveyor belt. Doesn't that reduce the personal touch and the ability to demonstrate empathy? Because computers and software, they are all about algorithms, right? They're all about patterns. You have certain inputs, they notice certain trends, and they come out one output, right? Isn't that confusing or contradicting?
That's where I think that you have to take a humble look at your business. If your servers are not providing any more personality than somebody is typing into the iPad's going to make less mistakes. Your food's going to get there quicker. You're already not providing, if somebody is just as willing to punch the food in an iPad, you're already probably not providing that personality. At the same time, something like Instagram, for instance. 10 years ago, social media wasn't really a thing in our industry. 5 years ago, you felt like if we do social media, that will put us ahead of the pack. Now, for a lot of millennials particularly, taking that picture of their drink and sharing it with their friends and sharing their experience is just as much a part of their experience as the flavor of the food and drink. So you have to be open to saying, well, if that's what the guest really wants, if that's a big part of the enjoyment, what are some things we can do to apply those same principles of hospitality? Is the lighting appropriate both to make people look nice, but also to light their drink nicely for pictures? Are there some places that are great backgrounds for them to take an Instagram picture? What do we do on Instagram that seems not robotic and just sort of corporate boring? How do we engage in the guests? Saying, oh, it's all about the personal touch, so that only means when they walk through the door, is just being stubborn. Part of that empathy is saying, what is it that my guest really wants? If we recognize now that what they really want and what they're getting value of that experience is taking the picture, maybe we start to put a little more elaborate garnishes. Maybe we pay more attention to the color of our drink instead of just the flavor. You have to adapt to give the guests what they need, and that is going to change with the technology. How do we make the technology a tool to share who we authentically are and what the experiences we're trying to get across, rather than see it as a threat to our job, I suppose.
And that goes back to the part where we talk about prediction on what we think is the experience that the guests want to have. I was just thinking about, how do you decide whether it is you go along with that or you stick to your principles?
I think the principles should kind of transcend that, right? The principles, it's probably not like a good bedrock principle to build your business on. If something like, do we let people take bookings through an online app or not, affects that, right? I think those principles of, we're going to do it with personality, we're going to make it feel personal. If you start from the principles, then you say, what is a creative way we can use this technology to communicate who we are in an authentic way? I don't know what all the answers are for that necessarily, but I would say Instagram's a great example. Years ago, we kind of felt like cocktail bars should be a place where people put down their phones for a while and engage in a one-on-one conversation. I still may feel that way some, but the younger generation is using their phones in a way that's very different. And to them, that's part of the sharing their experience with their friends. Just being stubborn is putting my ego and what I want the experience to be, or what I think it should be for them, above what the experience actually is for my guests. So I think we say, what are some ways we can make them taking a picture at my bar more cool and feel better than the 17 other places that they're going to take pictures of their food this week, right? Not sure what all the answers are, but mostly it's letting the guest, you have your principles, but letting the guests give you feedback on what it is they really want, rather than you deciding this is what I want to provide and people that like it or don't like it.
Very insightful. Okay, so in a while we're going to get some final thoughts, and as I was going through this past, it's more than an hour already. It reminds me actually of a dining experience I had at Shangri-La. So I was there for a dinner, and I usually go there either for an anniversary or as part of a company lunch. With COVID, buffets are not allowed. So they had to serve the food to your table. And of course, the options were much more limited than it usually was. So there was a waiter who came by, and I said, hey, do you still have that teh tarik thing? Because it used to be at, they used to have a fixed station where you could go and get teh tarik anytime, and I love the teh tarik there. So I said, so unfortunately, we only serve that during breakfast. We don't have it for dinner anymore. And I said, okay, well, thank you. I'll just take whatever you say. 10 minutes later, he came back and he said, sir, just now you wanted the teh tarik. When you need it, you just let me know, or you can just let my staff at the reception know, and we can go to the cafe upstairs and grab a cup down for you anytime you want. And I was like, whoa, it was so out of the ordinary. And okay, the truth is this, right? We had some feedback about the food that came by, because it seemed to be of a different, not the ideal temperature, because of whatever reason. And we did feedback to him, but I also did tell him that the level of service was incredible. And it goes back to what you were talking about, right? Where you had the peak end kind of thing, where you remember the best and you remember the last thing that happened. And I left with a very, very good feeling about that entire place. Mm-hmm. And for all you know, he could have offered that option to every other guest out there, but it felt like it was so personal to me. And I said, I'll definitely be back in a couple of months, because I really enjoyed the experience over there. And that kind of sums up the things that we were talking about in terms of how of extraordinary hospitality. Right. Joe, your final thoughts?
I think tying in perfectly with that, what my final thought would be is rules in a hospitality setting are there in order to get to a good answer as quickly and efficiently as possible for the most amount of people. That's why your standards are there. Great hospitality is knowing when doing something different than the SOP or the rule that you have is getting you to an even better answer. In your case, they probably said, we're a little short on manpower. We took a look. 90% of people use the teh tarik station for the brunch service. Most people don't really want it for dinner. We can just put it aside. But if you can do it, you should do it. When you said you wanted teh tarik, he's not thinking, but we put it up. He's like, I could do that, so let me just go do it, right? The rules are there so you don't have to make it up from scratch every time. But don't let the rules get in the way of a better answer. That's the core, I think, of making it personal. People aren't special. It's not a unique situation. A lot of the things that somebody is going to want, you can predict. Make those things very efficient, so you can spend that, so you have that space, you have that extra time to do those little special touches as they come along, and use your judgment and use your empathy to make the right decision in the moment. And you have to have built yourself that little bit of space in order to do so. I think that these sort of principles of hospitality not only can be applied to almost any industry, but how you make your guest feel is the thing that will set you apart from your competitors and provide that sort of sustainable competitive advantage in just about any situation, and just a little bit goes a long way. Just put yourself in their shoes and think, what would I be looking for out of this situation? What would make me feel special? You're probably not that much different than anyone else. Treat people the way that you would like to be treated in these situations, and you're going to get good outcomes.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Joe. And Joe, as you mentioned, he's owner at Junior the Pocket Bar. Would you tell us a bit about Junior the Pocket Bar and how we can go visit you?
Sure. So during the phase 2 period, we are a very small room. For those of you who have been there, we can only fit about 8 to 10 packs at one time during the phase 2 period. So always before, we were a first come, first serve, just really approachable neighborhood bar. For now, if you want to come join us, I would really suggest to make a reservation at juniorthepocketbar.com, or come in a bit earlier on one of the weekdays. A lot of folks still aren't back at the office, so there's not too many people in the downtown area. We can always take you if you make a special occasion of it. If you're working from home, come out, meet a friend at 6 o'clock on a Wednesday night, and us and all of the F&B establishments around the CBD area will really appreciate it. We look forward to getting back to normal over the next couple months and welcome you all back. For now, please support the places that you like and the places you want to see make it through the next couple of months.
All right, Joe Alessandroni, thank you so much for joining us. And everyone, thank you for tuning in. So we'll catch you next Sunday at 3 o'clock for the next episode of Life, Love, and Lipidemia. Thank you, everyone. Have a good weekend. Bye-bye.